Today we're going to talk about starting that research. The first thing, the easiest way to get this going is to start with key organizations. From their websites, from their reports and other things that you'll find there, that's where you're going to begin to fill in the other information. Some of them will have issue briefs. They probably don't use our exact format, but there'll be lots of information there. So that's the first thing. When you're doing that, have a way of keeping track of key individuals. There's an organization, but then there's individuals within that organization who run the organization, who publish the report, who are named in various ways. People you're going to want to reach back out to in that interview stage that I mentioned a minute ago. So have a way of doing that. Because your issue brief pages will be set up, I expect you to put these right on there as you go along. So this isn't put them on a Google Doc and then post them here. It's just put them right on the wiki page. And you've already seen with the state and local bureaus kind of the basic format for that.
Just real quick, when you say then, you're referring to the key organizations?
Correct. The individuals, you don't have to put those guys on. One of the things is they often change, and so keeping that up to date can be challenging. But you ought to individually or as you do the work, keep track of who those individuals are. If you want to put their names and their titles on the wiki as well underneath the organization, that's under an indented bullet, totally fine to do that. If that's the smoothest way to keep track. Now, when you're going to look for organizations, we want you to look for all types. And we have those categories on the wiki, right? So we have government agencies, nonprofit organizations that are service providers. We talked about that language at the beginning. We also have nonprofits that are advocacy or membership or networks of organizations, associations, those kinds of things, councils. Foundations are critical. They're funding often the cool new things. So they'll be also a source of some of the options and models. Think tanks, and just every other kind of organization you can think about that has that works on your issue. So it's the full gamut. Now, doing that search, one of the ways to do it is to type some keywords along with your topic, right? And so some keywords might be issue brief on or research brief on police reform, program evaluations of police reform or on police reform. You just program evaluation police reform. You don't have to even have the preposition. Policy paper, funders, National Association of. So those, just put those keywords in there too, not just the organization, not just the topic title, but some of these additional words that will trigger sort of a better response from Google or whatever search engine you use. The second thing is when you get into the organization page, hunt around. You're not just finding the name of the organization, you're trying to find on that organization where there might be other sources, research papers. Look at the research paper. Who published it? That might help you with a key person or two. That research paper may have been done in partnership with another organization. You'll find that on the first couple pages typically. Who funded that research? That'll help you find some foundations that are concerned with that issue. And the organization web pages, particularly if they're associations or doing different initiatives, they'll have organizational partners. Go look for them. So this will be on any single site. You'll begin to find these other areas. If they're advocating for something, or they have a legislative agenda that they're advocating for, flag that. That's going to end up showing up in your policy options and model programs. It also, frankly, will help you indicate, oftentimes they're amending existing legislation, so it'll help you find current policy, current programs. Now, when you look at who the board members are. Look at what organizations they work in. That's another place you're going to find other organizations to look at. I already mentioned funders. So those are just a couple of kind of things you're going to see on a website for any organization at all the different levels. It's obvious that you're going to find the largest number of organizations at the national level. That's clear. We know that. But at the state level, you'll find less, and at the local level, you'll find even less. Remember, for local, we're talking about your city or town, the county you're in, and then any regional organizations that do work in your that overlap in that town and that county that affects the organizations and the issue that is taking place in your place. Virtually all of your issue briefs have a local dimension to it and have a state dimension to it, and certainly have a national dimension to it. But it's going to be interesting as we walk through each of them. We might find out that there's some of them may be a little more weighted towards one of those levels than the other. So you're a sleuth in this area. Act like a journalist, and really sort of work your way through it. The last thing is you will find websites that themselves are functioning a little bit like what we're trying to do with the Policy Options Wiki, which is they are themselves they have directories of organizations. USA.gov gives you a good window, just an example, into the federal bureaucracy. GuideStar is one of the ones that rates nonprofits. That may be another place you go. Again, I've already mentioned national associations, but national associations will have directories of organizations. You will find, for instance, that a federal department will have a page for your state. So it'll be HUD. I think I saw this earlier in Tennessee. HUD has a page that focuses on all the HUD activity in Tennessee. HUD is a federal agency. They only belong on the national page, unless they have a branch office in Tennessee, which I don't believe they do. Tennessee has their own state level housing community development department, and then your city or town will have one likely as well. So there'll be information at the federal page about what's happening locally, but it doesn't mean the HUD is an organization that needs to show up as your local organization. We'll weed some of this out as we give you feedback, so don't worry too much about it. But you're doing this massive search, looking for all kinds of stuff. Obviously, the first assignment is find the key organizations. But in that process, you're going to find all this other stuff. You have to each figure out a way to keep track of that. And some of you will find some statistics that fit under scope of the problem. It's okay for you to put that fact there and learn how to use the footnotes and add it. But this is a place, particularly if you're working with a number of other folks, you may want to do a shared Google Doc to start pasting stuff in there before you then organize it and summarize it and profile it on the wiki. But the organizations can go directly there. Some of the other stuff you may want to wait a little bit as you gather the information. If you're working with a group of folks, in almost every instance, you're gonna share the work of doing the national page, the USA page. You just will. If there's 2 of you, if there's 5 of you, you will also share the work of profiling a policy option or a series of them or model programs. We'll talk a little bit later about the difference between those 2 things. And then the effort of categorizing and grouping them. And that discussion will be really quite interesting to you and be very useful to the reader. So you'll share that work together. That's what you have to coordinate. You're individually going to do your own state and your own city. So this is pretty straightforward, but that's kind of how I would approach it. Now, how you actually do the coordination, it's completely up to you. We've got Basecamp there for you if you want to use it, but there's many other ways to coordinate that. Obviously, Zoom calls as well.